Hey guys, so excited. Vlog number 2. This vlog is going to be the vlog that explains Dustin and the whole Werdeman family's full journey with Alpha One. I'm going to start by going back into the past and explain how the family discovered their Alpha One genes. Then we're going to jump to the present, sort of present slash past, and explain what we've dealt with in the last year. And then we're going to go to the future, as much in the future as I can, and explain what we know our future is going to be. It's not much that I can tell you right now. Sorry. I do have plenty of pictures. I am going to do the big warning. There may be some graphic pictures, so just a heads up there. And going back into his past is going to bring up some stuff that the family had to deal with. And so another warning there. It's pretty sad past. So another warning. Just for that. So there's your 2 warnings. So if you're ready, here we go. Back into the future. Not really. Back into the past. So here we go. The past. So in 1987, Sue and Andy, they're my in-laws, had already 2 kids. My sister-in-law Angie, and then Dustin, and they had their 3rd son, Brandon. So 1987, Brandon was born. As he was getting older and progressing with his age, I guess you could say, they've noticed he never really gained weight. He was getting more jaundice, so they did a bunch of tests and found out he had Alpha One. Back in the 80s, 1987, Alpha One wasn't a common disease. So a lot of people didn't know what Alpha One was. So it was still newly coming around. So in 1989 is when Brandon needed his first transplant. He was 12 months old when they did the first one. It didn't take. They're thinking it was either a bad liver or something was off. It didn't take. So at 18 months old, he had a second transplant. The whole time, up until he was 18 months old, he never did get to come home. He lived in the hospital the whole time. And eventually, after the second transplant, he came down with mono. And that led to Epstein-Barr, which is just a worse case of mono. The Epstein-Barr, then after that, he developed T-cell lymphoma. And that just, his 18-month-old little body could not handle that. And so he eventually passed away. So that was Dustin's brother. I never got to meet him, of course, because he was 18 months old and Dustin was only 3. So they had to deal with that and bury their son. Sorry, this is the hard part. I gave you a warning. So after all that said and done, eventually Alpha One was starting to becoming more. And so they had tested Angie and Dustin. And so in 1990, at the age of 4, Dustin was tested, and initially he was just a carrier, which I will explain more of that next week on what Alpha One and carrier and all that means. So initially just a carrier, but as he was getting older, he would wrestle more, 4-year-olds wrestle. So he was wrestling with one of his uncles, and his mom noticed he was getting more bruises that weren't going away. They're not really getting better. His arms and his legs were getting skinnier, but his belly was getting bigger. and more distended. So she took him in, and they found out he wasn't just a carrier. He was in liver failure. The whole time all of this is going on, never once did he get jaundice. So usually, which I'll explain next week too, usually you'll get jaundice, your belly will get distended, and everything else gets skinny. Sort of like what he looks like today. But the whole time he never did get jaundice. And so, sorry, I'm moving my notes down here. So they were going back and forth on transplant. So in 1991, they were still going over that process. In 1991, he came down with chickenpox and was hospitalized for 6 weeks. While he was in there, they found ascites in his belly, and then he also had the varices in his esophagus, just like today. So they sclerosed the varices. He got better after 6 weeks, came out of the hospital. So then we go to August 2nd, 1992. That was the day he got his first transplant. I didn't know the day. I just knew it was 1992. So I learned a lot through this process of looking at his family history. So August 2nd, 1992, they decided to do a living donor transplant. That I will explain in 2 weeks. There's 2 different types of transplants. So his dad donated a portion of his liver to his son, Dustin. So they did the living related organ donation. So just a sliver of the liver was taken from his dad, and they put it into Dustin. He was hospitalized for a total of 2 months during that process, and that was just how it is. We now know it'll be about 4 to 6 weeks for hospitalization, but then it was 2 months. So he got better, got out of the hospital. Oh, I have pictures. Sorry, I'm slacking here. So this must have been the chicken pox because he was still pretty puffy. So this is in 91 when he had the chicken pox, hospitalized there. So you can see all of his toys over here. The reason I know it's a hospital is because of that. And he's in a wheelchair. So there is him in 91. And then this was probably pre-91, 92. There's no dates. So you can see distended belly, no real jaundice, but everywhere else pretty skinny, just that big belly there. And then we have before his surgery, him and his bunny. We still have that bunny. It's at my brother-in-law's house. But there you can see him, very cute little kid. That's my hubby. And then we have, so this was right after surgery. This is where they get graphic. So if you don't want to watch, turn away now. So like I said, August 2nd, Dad gave part of his liver. So here he is in his little oxygen machine, little high flow. You can see they did the surgery and all of that. I'm trying to get it to get good. There we go. The whole time he had his Ninja Turtles. We are Ninja Turtle freaks here. So the whole time, surgery and everything, his dad had one. He had one or 2. I don't know. He had them all, but he always had Ninja Turtles near. So here he is again. All of his IVs. And then this was a few days after surgery. So there, he's starting to get a little better, but you can see his incision here. Nice little upside down triangle, whatever you want to call that. He still has that scar, so if you ask him, he doesn't really like to show it, but he has it. And then his dad has a matching one too, and there they are. So you can definitely tell it was the 90s. That's my father-in-law. And then we have just a few days post-op here. You can start to see, I'm trying not to get the glare there. Still a little puffy. They had him on prednisone, which makes you puffy there, so. And finally, right before he gets to go home, this might even been before surgery. I, again, don't know the order of these pictures, but all of his Ninja Turtles. So even a pillow. So, yeah. So there are the past pictures. So he went home for a month. We'll get back into that. Went home for a month, and then his portal vein started clotting off. So he landed back in the hospital for a month. So after that month, he came home and was doing fabulous. They ended up moving up here. So from 1982 until 2007, he didn't have any issues. I met him in 2006, December of 2006, was informed of his Alpha-1. Didn't know this is what it would entail. So read up on Alpha-1, learned about it, and then, what was it, February 11th, 12th, I received a phone call that my grandpa had passed away. So I went back to my hometown to do funeral planning for my grandpa's funeral and just spend time with my family. And it was either February 13th. Yeah, it was February 13th because it was the day before Valentine's Day, because we didn't get to spend Valentine's Day together. Our first Valentine's Day together, he was in Omaha and I was in my hometown of Salem. So February 13th, received a phone call from him. He'd already made it to Omaha. They had life flighted him there for possible sepsis or bile duct issues. Still a little foggy on the details as I was newly dating him, so it was one of those two. My mother-in-law, I had asked her, and she was a little foggy too since it had been so long ago. But he was in Omaha for a total of 2 months. So every other weekend or whenever I had time off, I would go down to Omaha and see him. He eventually came back sometime in April. I know it was before my birthday, because I was worried we wouldn't get to spend my birthday together, my first birthday with him. But yeah, he came back. It had been fine up until then. So 2007, great. For 3 years. Then October 17th, 2010, his bile duct clogged. So they life flighted him to Omaha so he could have a drain. Actually, I believe he had 2 drains placed in his bile ducts. So he has a couple of scars from that too. At that time, he also went septic. So he was in the hospital only for about a week or a few weeks. October 19th, they were going to send him home, but his bilirubin jumped up. So the transplant team was thinking of possibly needing another transplant at this time. So they started doing the workup to get him listed on the transplant list. But eventually numbers came down and he leveled out. So they discharged him and we didn't have to do that. So then we jump to December of 2010. So around this time we were engaged, planning a wedding. Actually in October we were too, because he had proposed September of 2010. We were planning on getting married June of 2011, or July of 2011. But because of these hospital stays and visits, we postponed it. But December 2010, life flighted to Omaha again. A little foggy on the dates. I know it was around the 5th or 6th. He was life flighted, spent some time in the ICU, eventually got out of the ICU and went to the transplant floor. While there, his blood pressure did increase slightly and he had an infection, a liver infection. Not sure if it was bile duct or where, but his platelets were supposed to be around 230 and they were only 70. So that's how you could tell it was an infection. So he spent 6 weeks in the hospital at that time. So we went down for Christmas and spent Christmas in a hospital room with a, let's see, Dominic would have been 2. The 2-year-old who had the flu. that was fun. So 6 weeks in the hospital, then he came home, and nothing until then, until now. So we've had a few hospital stays, I believe like 2013, no, it would have been 2014, 2015. Just dehydration, never had to go to Omaha, just like a night or two in the hospital here in town, in Rapid City, South Dakota. I didn't mention that in the first video. But now we are to the present. 2017, December of 2017. Dustin, so because of the initial liver transplant, he's on a medication called Prograf. It's an anti-rejection med, so it helps your body not reject the liver. He's been on it since 1992. But because of that, they have to do monthly labs to monitor his Prograf level. So he does monthly labs. They want to make sure it doesn't get too high or too low. So in December, he went in to get his labs done. And they came back high, so we do them here in town. And then they fax the results to Omaha. Omaha gets them within usually a day or two, and then they'll call us if anything's wrong. So Omaha got those, called him, and said, something's not right. We need an MRI and an ultrasound of your liver to see what's going on. So December 12th, we got a phone call saying his liver was starting to fail. And I remember this day to a T. I was just getting ready to book plane tickets to go to Vegas in February for my best friend Laura's wedding, and just getting ready to put in my credit card information. Dustin was out in the garage and working on something. He came in and he goes, "Please tell me you haven't booked those plane tickets yet." And I said, "No, I was just getting ready to." He goes, "Stop. We need to chat." So the boys were home, or Colton was home. So he goes, "Come out to the garage, please." So I turned cartoons on, went out to the garage quick, and he told me, he goes, "Omaha just called." He goes, "You're gonna want to sit down." So I sat down. He goes, "My liver's starting to fail. They're a little worried, so we might have to have another transplant sooner than we thought." He goes, "I'm sorry to tell you this, with all of that, we're probably not going to be able to go to Vegas." So that's when I called my best friend to let her know I wouldn't be there. Love you, Laura. I know she's watching this. So we went through that process. We waited to tell people for a good month, and a month exactly, almost. January 6th, I was working nights, and I got a phone call at 1:30 in the morning from my lead therapist saying that Dustin was in the emergency room. He told me, "Give me your papers, give me your phone, you need to go down with your husband." And I said, "Okay." Got down there, my father-in-law had brought him in. He was in severe abdominal pain, crunched over, crying. So they said he was septic, his lactic, I don't even remember what it was, but it was high. So they, the next morning at around 11:30, came in and said, "Hey, we're life flighting you to Omaha." So I had been up all night and all day. Didn't go to sleep until probably 9 p.m. that following night. So we get to Omaha. I have pictures. Oh, nope, I don't have pictures yet. So they told us, "We're going to be life flighting you." At 11:30, the flight team shows up. So I have yet to flown at this point. Vegas was supposed to be my first time flying. I was so excited. So when the flight team tells me, "Are you flying along?" I said, "Heck yeah, I am." So that was my first time flying. Loved it. it was the best time ever. Didn't like the case that we were flying to get him to a hospital, but it was a good flight. Mid-flight, his blood pressure dropped. So initially we were on the transplant floor. They sent us to the ICU because his blood pressure dropped. So the ultrasound, they did an ultrasound in Rapid City before we went to Omaha, and it showed a possible blood clot in his portal vein. So they started him on blood thinners, and then we got to Omaha and everything changed. They were unsure where his sepsis was coming from. Was it that portal vein? Was it the blood clot? What was going on? So shipped us to Omaha. We were in the ICU January 7th. So just a day later, everything changed. Sorry, people are trying to call me. Everything changed. They did a new ultrasound and it showed no clot. His white blood cell count was still high, so we knew there was an infection somewhere, and it just happened to be an infected bile duct. So getting all of that situated, eventually he moved out of the ICU and went to, they have a transplant floor or transplant unit. It's called the solid organ transplant unit, or the SO2. And so they moved us there. And I have pictures of that. And actually this, I believe, could have been the 6th when we got to Omaha, because we were sending pictures to the boys. Oop. Try and get that situated there. Sorry. So there is us. And then there is him. Just hanging out. And so we'll get back to that in a little bit. So hanging out on the transplant unit, and January 8th, labs are starting to get better. The team rounded, and they had stated that they were going to send us home, discharge home. But their liver team doesn't do their rounds until like 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And my mother-in-law, well, we had flown down, so we didn't have a vehicle at the time. So we had told them he hadn't been out of bed at this point. He'd been in bed the whole time. And because of that, not walking, possibly being weak, fluid overloaded, and all of that, we asked him if we could wait a day. See how he did the rest of the day, get him up and walking a few times, get some of that fluid off of him, and then go home. And so they said yes, and because of everything that had happened, they knew he needed that transplant. So they wanted to start the beginning stages of getting us listed on the transplant. So they came in later that day and started that process. And then he had been on a full liquid diet, and so they switched him to solids, and he started throwing up. So walking, he was weak, still fluid overloaded, and throwing up. It was probably a good thing we requested to stay another day. But I called my mother-in-law, her and the boys started driving the 9-hour drive to come pick us up the next day. So January 9th, Dustin got discharged. Was doing great. Sepsis and his labs numbers started dropping, getting around his normal level and the normal level for sepsis level. So they had said, yes, let's get you out of here. And so we have, make sure it's the right picture. Nope, I don't have that picture, sorry. So we sat in a hotel room. I had gotten a hotel room at the hospital for one night, and his mom showed up. It would have been January 10th to pick us up. So then we jump to February 5th. We is the day that we were waiting for. We were in Omaha for his transplant evaluation. So a transplant evaluation, which I will explain in a couple weeks, the full process, but it's a few days of extensive appointments and talking to people and all of that. So he had to get an echocardiogram, labs. We met with somebody to go over his history and physical. Went over and met his new liver doctor, Dr. Oliveira. An appointment with a social worker to go over financial stuff. Then he meets with the surgeon, Dr. Mercer, which we absolutely love. Surgeon, so that first day, so we saw Dr. Mercer last, and the surgeon said they have to present his case to a board, and if the board decides he's bad enough or whatever, then he gets listed. So the surgeon said they wouldn't know for a few days if he would be placed or not, because his MELD score was so low. So the MELD score is another thing I'll go over too. I know this is all, in the end, it'll all make sense. So the MELD score is a score. They take a whole bunch of stuff and put it into a score, and that lists you on the list, on the transplant list. So usually the high is 40 and the low is 0, and he was listed at a 14. So not quite even in the middle. He's pretty low on the list. But Dr. Mercer, looking at him, he goes, if we would have looked at your score in January, he would have been a 22. He goes, so you can go from one extreme to the next. He goes, Dustin, I look at you right now. And he goes, I wouldn't even guess you were in liver failure. He goes, but I looked at you in January. He goes, then I could tell. He goes, so that was just even a month. He went from a 22 to a 14. He goes, so I know you can go from one extreme to the next. So he goes, I'm going to fight for you to get on the list because I think you need to be listed now. So when you get critical enough, hopefully we don't get to that point. So February 6th, sorry, we had more appointments. So usually for the evaluation, it's 3 to 4 days, they said, but because we're from out of town, they wanted to try and cram everything into 2 days. So it was, the first day was 8 hours of everything. And then the second day, it was like 5 or 6 hours of appointments. So more appointments. We met more people. I think we saw a nutritionist, a pharmacist to go over medications. He had to get a psych eval to make sure that we were both ready for this. And then my favorite part, he had to go to respiratory to get a PFT, which is what I used to do. So I was excited because I wanted to see what his numbers were and see how Omaha did it compared to how Rapid City does it. Little did I know, I wasn't allowed to go back with him, which I'm still not happy about. But he did his PFT, and then we got to go home. So because it was so late in the day, it was 3 o'clock by the time we got done with those appointments, and we had a 9-hour drive ahead of us. We decided to stay another night. We had the room for a few nights. So we canceled the other nights, but stayed for another night. So February 7th, on our drive home, the nurse coordinator called us. They always meet on Wednesdays. And so February 7th happened to be a Wednesday. And the only reason I remember that is because Super Bowl Sunday, I believe, was the 4th or the 5th. I don't remember for sure. But, so we met with the nurse coordinator, or she called us and had informed he's on the list. So he is listed on the transplant list. Pretty low. Again, he was only a 14 at this time, but it can change because he does monthly labs. And per UNOS, which is the UNOS. They do the organ donation. There we go. They have certain requirements. Once you get so high, it can change, which I will go into sooner. But because he was low, he only had to do monthly labs. And so And I didn't show you. So here is him. We are sitting and waiting at the appointment. As you can see, it is snowing. So there we are in one of the waiting rooms. So then we jump to May. So how this all started is back in September, October of last year, he had noticed he was getting a hernia, a groin hernia. So we went to one of the doctors here in town, and per Omaha, they wanted to do his labs and they came back high. So because he's such a high risk with his liver, we had told Dr. Oliveira and Dr. Mercer about his hernia, and they wanted him to do the surgery in Omaha. So May 1st, we went down. They needed to do a scope anyways to see if there was varices, because with every liver patient, you can get varices, and that'll show how severe your disease is. So May 1st, we went down. One day they were going to do his labs, workup and everything for his scope, and then do his hernia repair the next day. So we're going to stay for a few days. I believe it was 3 days. So we went back to Omaha May 1st, did routine labs. They did his scope, and then we waited a few hours to let him get the sedation worn off, and then he did his hernia repair. They wanted to keep him overnight because of his liver history. So he had to stay the night just to make sure nothing bad would happen. So it was a long day for us. I have pictures from that, and they're quite funny. So let me see here. So here he is, a little groggy, coming back from his scope, which came back. He had stage 2 varices. I don't remember. I believe it goes up to stage 4. So stage 2, it just showed he needed a liver transplant. So here he is, still a little groggy, starting to wake up a little bit more. This was after the hernia surgery, so he's trying to eat there. Said he was in pain. Clearly he's a little sleepy. He's trying to take a drink there. And still trying to take a drink. He said he was in a lot of pain, but he couldn't keep his eyes opened. So, yeah. So that was May. Came home, did great. Hernia repair went really good. Came back as like the size of an orange. The doctor was shocked. So sight looks good and all of that. So Dustin's birthday is July 15th. We had an extended weekend. I took off for his birthday since his birthday was on a Sunday. We love going camping, kayaking, fishing, and all of four-wheeling. So we went out for the weekend camping. While we were out camping, it was that